So I'm going to start my live podcast recording. I'm really excited. Shout out to Justin who comes here and he owns the podcast studio. He came in here and make it possible. All right. So Ayesha Selden. She is a private wealth advisor with a Fortune 500 company that is among the top 25 largest asset managers in the world. While pursuing an economics and marketing degree at Temple University's Fox School of Business, Ayesha was introduced to the financial services industry. Ayesha primarily invests in real estate throughout the city of Philadelphia and suburbs. Ayesha currently has over 24 properties in her real estate portfolio and serves as a board member on 2 organizations in Philadelphia, which serves to break the cycle of poverty in homeless women, and one which helps Philadelphia high school students take the necessary steps to get accepted and then transition into college. She also went to Central High School. Yeah. Central High School, CHS. Yes, there you go. Exactly. Don't front. Not front. Come on here, Ayesha. Thank you.
I was so nervous I was going to fall up those steps.
Me too, every time. So, as Ayesha's sitting down, I always like to make a joke that she is my woman crush because she is. She is amazing. She's so smart. If you follow her, Ayesha Selden, at Ayesha Selden on Instagram, yep. She is hilarious. But she's also a real estate beast. And she's also really smart. She gives some really good jewels. So, like, comedy, smart, and real estate, that's my kind of woman. So, first of all, thank you so much.
Thank you. Do I need this? I need this, right? What's this thing around my neck for then?
You do. Just for the recording.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I read off your bio. Why don't you tell us in your words a little bit about yourself?
I think you told everything. I was born and raised in Philly, South Philly. I am a nerd, so I think Marquita said earlier, I'm always nervous speaking in front of people. I am a numbers person. I am a money person. I'm not really a people person. So like usually like how I get my jokes and laughs is just through Instagram, laughing at myself. So I'm very introverted, so I'm nervous. My heart's racing, so.
So okay, let's talk about like your main job. Can you talk about that at all?
Not really.
Okay.
So I'm a licensed stockbroker. So there are restrictions that we have on what we can say and what we can't say. I can't say the name of the firm, but my office is in Philadelphia. I primarily and it's interesting because investing in real estate, I should say, is just a hobby. So I mean, I park my money. I am an investor at heart. I park my money in various investments. Real estate is just one of them. So when people say, yeah, why don't you quit your job and, get into real estate full time? And I'm like, well, why would I do that? This is not, real estate is not life for me. Investing is life for me. And real estate just happens to be one of the places that I park my money. I think real estate is probably one of the better investments, but I have money in a franchise that I run. I have money in stocks, of course, because that's my first passion. When I came out of Temple in 2000, I got directly into working as a licensed stockbroker, and I've been doing that for 17 years. That is my bread and butter. Real estate is just a great way to make at least 20% a year. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Right. Okay, so you just gave me so much information. I don't even know how to pick that apart to go into the next question. So, okay, let's talk about one of the things that you do, that you have done. You have X amount of properties with no debt. You want to talk about that?
So right now, because I just sold one, Michelle, my realtor, unloaded one. Thank you. She did an incredible job.
Hey.
So I was at 26. I'm now down to 25 properties, and I have right now 4 mortgages. I'm right at about, I think my real estate portfolio is about 3.3 million, and I've got about 500,000 worth of debt. So I think that's about a 15% loan to value.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't like debt. I am very and we all have various stages of what works for us, what doesn't work for us. I am a very conservative investor, and that's just across the board. I don't take large risks. I take calculated risks, and I've seen over the last couple of decades working in the stock business, I've seen markets collapse. I've seen real estate markets collapse. So it makes me very nervous to be highly leveraged.
Okay.
So I've got 4 mortgages.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. You see why she's my girl crush, right? So, okay, let's take it back. Let's take it back to when you first got into real estate.
Yep.
describe that scene and talk about why you even started doing it.
Yep. So very, very quickly. So when I was when I graduated from college, I stayed at home in college and graduated, worked 2 years, still lived at home with my mom. And my goal was to buy a foreclosed property and rent it and stay at home with my mom because she did my laundry and dinner was always. And I didn't have any like bills, no rent. I would have stayed. And my mom is like one of those weird moms where like if we all like lived on a cult like Jim Jones kind of compound as a family, that would work for her. That's mom's like ideal. So she wasn't kicking me out. So my goal was I was going to buy a HUD property. Found a property which is right off of City Line Avenue. If you guys know where the Iroquois Apartments used to be, now the LA Fitness is there. So I found a property right on 46th Street, and it was $67,000 at the time. And I said, this is a good property. I'm going to stay at home. I'll rent it. Got a couple colleges nearby, so I'm going to just buy this. Pay $67,000. Needed just cosmetic work, carpets, a little bit of plumbing work, and I bought that house. And then I found out, because I'm not great, this is why I need attorneys and accountants, because I don't read fine print things. I found out like a few days prior to closing that with a HUD property, I actually had to be an owner-occupant. So this was God. This was God like, girl, you are not gonna have a rental property and live at home with your mama. It's not what you're gonna do. Because that was my plan, you know what I mean? So God had another plan. He said, look, no, you're going to move out and do your own thing. You're too old at this point. But so I found out a few days prior, and my mom like cried. Like she's like, where you going, baby? I'm like, Mom, I'm going right to City Avenue. You'll be fine. We'll make it. So I ended up having to move into the property, which was not my initial intention, but I moved into the property and then ended up getting a roommate. So it still ended up being a cash flowing property because Doris paid my rent.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, so then now you're like, okay, I see I can do this. I can actually have someone pay for my life. Like, take us to the next, like, take us to some key moments that got us to Ayesha portfolio of 3.1 million.
Yep, so I'm, one of my degrees in college was economics, so I'm always looking at the market, and I'm always, like right now, I'm getting a little bit nervous. I'm thinking, we might be getting into a bit of a bubble. So in 2002 was when I bought this house. I actually ended up moving for work to Virginia. I got an opportunity to run an office in Virginia Beach in 2004. So I rented my City Avenue house full time. 2004, and I didn't buy anything from 2002 to 2004. I ended up buying a property in Conshohocken, a suburb right outside of Philly. I bought a property with a guy I worked with. He and I bought a property, and then I moved to Virginia and was working as a field VP down in our VA Beach office. And I didn't buy anything else up until the market crashed in 2011. So again, I am an investor. Most of from 2004 basically up until 2011, I was just putting money into stocks. I moved back home in 2007, kind of watched the collapse. You guys have, you probably saw it in the value of your 401ks. You probably saw it in, home values if you tried to sell something. So in 2011, I looked around and said, I think we're probably at a bottom. And if you guys recall, it was really, really hard to get a loan in 2011. So I used what I call, and I always tell everyone, get an equity piggy bank. That first house I bought in 2002, that house on 46th Street that I paid $67,000 for, at the time had a much lower mortgage. I'd owned it at that point for several years, and obviously it had even still appreciated because I bought it at a very discounted price, even when the market was much lower. So I had a bunch of equity there. So I said, I think we're at a good point in the market. I was able to get a loan, a home equity line of credit against that house. That was my primary residence. When I moved back to Philly and said, look, it's 2011, most people can't get loans. I pulled the equity out of that house and went to a market that I was very familiar with. And I always look around the city and think, all right, where's opportunity gonna be? So I went to South Philly, which is my stomping grounds, and said, I want to buy a property. I've got cash because I pulled the equity out of that 46th Street property. And I found a house right on the 1300 block of South Mole Street, which if you guys know South Philly, that's between Wharton and Reed, between 15th and 16th. So I'm thinking it's close to Broad, the block's a little shady, the neighbor, like the captain was out dancing naked, but I'm thinking this is still probably a good move.
So it was it a pure coincidence that you chose South Philly?
No, nothing's coincidence. I just figured South Philly would be a good market.
Okay, let me just pause real quick. I hope that y'all understand the magnitude of the moves that this woman made, right? She bought something in 2002, saw that the market was about, like, I worked in finance. So I worked in finance. Actually, we discovered that I got my 7 when I think you were leaving. Now that I'm remembering, when I put the person to, you were leaving, about to go to VA Beach. I worked at that office that she was at for literally 2 weeks. I used them to get my 7 and I was out. So I ended up becoming a bond trader, right? So I saw from 2002 all the way up to 2007 that, you know, everything was just climbing. So she chilled, right? Everybody was buying everything. And then you bought your next property in 2008 after everything bottomed out.
2011.
2011, after everything bottomed out.
Yep.
Right? While everybody else was selling. Right? Do you understand that? Yes. And then, so you know what? What's the hottest market in Philadelphia right this moment?
South Philly.
She bought a property in South Philly before it got hot. Okay. I just want to go on. Okay.
You're like Nicole Winfrey up here. So yeah, so I had cash because I used the equity from the 46th Street property. I bought this house, and you guys, I didn't know at the time, but a way you can associate it, you guys have heard of the real estate term BRRRR. In case you haven't heard of it, I'll go through it in a second. But so I bought this house in South Philly, the 1300 block of South Mole. It cost $56,000 to buy. Mind you, the house right next door, which is a total shell that has to be demolished, they just paid $140,000 for a house that needs to get demoed. So I paid $56,000 for this house. Needed very light cosmetic work. I mean, I left the wood paneling, I painted over it, like, judge yourself. That's what I did. I did some laminate, like, we kept it moving. Like, very little budget on the house. So paid maybe $8,000 or so worth of repairs into it. So I bought the house, I rehabbed it. That's the B and the R, by the way. And then I rented it. So I found a tenant, and I'll never forget Sarah. The day I was showing the property, she was like waiting in the rain, like sitting like a little hipster, the South Philly, like early on South Philly girl. But great credit, and grandma was rich, so I'm like, we good. So Sarah ended up renting the property, so I had a lease, and then I went to the bank with the lease and said, I want to refi out of this property. So follow me here. You've got a house I paid $56,000 for. According to the bank, I don't owe anything on this property, right? Because I paid cash as far as they know. It's a free and clear prop. So I paid cash for the house, I rented it, I took my lease to Philadelphia Federal Credit Union and said, I need y'all to give me a loan against this property because I own it free and clear. I have a tenant, it's a cash flowing property. Can you give me a loan for it? So the bank said, absolutely. They ended up giving me, I think, like $60,000 or so, which was slightly under what I put into it. So I took that $60,000 and I said, I think I should probably do the same thing all over again, right? So I then went around the corner to the 1400 block of South Chadwick Street, and I remember, I'll never forget, it was a very shady owner. The guy was originally asking $65,000, they pulled it off the market. I found the owner and said, look, I really want to buy it. I saw you dropped it. He ended up going down to like $60,000, but he's like, no, now I want $65,000. He was like kind of shady. So I ended up paying $65,000 for this house directly around the corner, which I thought was overpaying, and I was actually a little upset about it at the time, but obviously.
Right, you remember, that was a long time ago.
So I paid $65,000 for this house in the 1400 block of South Chadwick, which is between 16th and 17th, between Reed and Dickinson. Again, same thing, light work. I put some carpet in there, painted over, the walls that were there, put very little into the house, and found a tenant, and literally did the exact same thing all over again. So here I had another property in South Philly. I found a tenant, so I did the first B is the buy. I then rehabbed it. I then rented it. I then refinanced, and the last R is you repeat the process all over again. So literally, that was what my 2011 looked like. I'm thinking this is probably as low as the Philly market's going to get, and in my mind, like my only regret today is actually two. One, not buying more Apple stock that year. And two, not damn near going bankrupt trying to buy, because again, I am conservative. I should have been a little bit more aggressive There were houses in South Philly that I lost, and I still know the addresses, and I drive by like I lost, you know.
I believe you 100%.
Yeah,
You might go by there now.
Yeah, that's my house. But I kept doing the same thing all over again. I went back to the 1300 block of South Mole, and at this point I was getting a little bit better with negotiating. I found a 3-bedroom on the same block that I bought the first house on the 1300 block of South Mole. A 3-bedroom across the street. I paid $56,000 for the first one. I ended up getting the 3-bedroom for $6,000 less. I paid $50,000 for that one. Same thing. These houses didn't need a lot of work. I went in, I did my cosmetic work, and then I just kept going. I mean, and since then I've gone from, I guess, 2 houses. I bought one in 02, one in 04 in Conshohocken. Didn't buy anything until 2011, and then literally from 2011 until like 2 weeks ago, I went up to 25.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so tell me, what are the economic indicators that you look for as you're assessing markets? Whether that is, I mean, obviously we're here talking about real estate, but are there anything that transcend all of the industries? And where are you looking? Like, where are you getting your information from to make these decisions?
I mean, for real estate investing, for me, and I do just a lot of like, I do a lot of gut checks. I post a lot on social media, so for a long time, and I just get priced out of areas. So for example, when I was buying in South Philly in 2011, at some point the market started to heat up, I think like right around 12, 13. So then I got priced out of that area. So then I went back to where my house was on 46th Street. I bought a house on Conshohocken Avenue. Those were starting to get a little pricey. Then I went to West Philly and started buying there, and then I started getting priced out of there. So I'm really looking for, you know, I've got my own expectations. I have a 20% cap rate. So by 2000, I think in 14, I stopped doing loans altogether. So I actually know by 2012, I took my last loan. So now I just do cash. And a part of the reason I do that is because as I kept buying these properties, at some point I started saying, all right, enough is enough with the loans. And then I started having like enough rent that was coming in where I started using my rent to pay down and off those mortgages. And I think that's an important piece. Because that takes and requires a lot of discipline. Because most people, when you start getting that rent roll pickup, you start balling. You know, it's like when you ball, maybe balling is okay, but you ball maybe just a little decade or two early. You know what I mean? Like you missed the mark on just, you know. So I started using my rent. In fact, I still today, I don't take any of my real estate income. The money I spend, because I do take good vacations, but the money I spend comes from my franchise, not from my real estate. I do not spend a dime still of real estate money. I posted a check. My real estate partner was pretty upset with me. I posted a check.
I reposted it too. And then people was calling me. I was like, if Ayesha's fine with it, I'm fine with it. And I thought you took it down. I took it down too.
Michelle, my real estate attorney, because I'm just dumb. I'm like, you know, that's a bowling check. I posted my real estate partner called me, take that check down as once for all of it, kidnapped. She was like, deactivate my Instagram account. I was like, she's like, we're all gonna get killed. Like, take it out. So like, you know, I haven't even like, you know, so with that money, I used some of it to buy another house. I'm actually gonna pay off my brother and my niece's college loans with some of it. I'm gonna, family, people say family and everything, they don't mean it. People say family and everything. You're on your own, brother. Yeah, no, I mean it. So, you know, I don't, you know, I literally reinvest every dime. So as the rent rolls really started to pick up, those loans that I was taking early on, and that's an important piece for you guys. Because I think what happens is, you know, and you hear people say all the time, I'm like the cash out boss, I'm the cash out king, you know, that's all fine and good. And if I had to do things over again, because people misunderstand that, like, well, Ayesha, you say you wouldn't take loans. If I had to do it all over again back in 2011, I would have done it exactly as I did it. I would have borrowed. I would have done that BRRR strategy, because that's what was required at the time. But the minute you can stop borrowing, stop borrowing. Because what happens is, you know, and people think, well, what's the worst case scenario? If you've got and just you guys may want to jot this down. If you've got a property that you're looking to finance against in this market where the market is really high, I think, and it may still have a couple of years before a bubble burst or something, but I would not be pulling more than about 50 to 60% out of that property. That's just my personal opinion. I wouldn't be borrowing 80%. You know, even if a bank will say, well, we'll give you 80, 90% of it, I wouldn't do that. And a part of the reason I wouldn't is because if you think about how a bubble works, if the bubble bursts and you owe 80% or 90% of the current value, loan to value against your property, if the bubble bursts and you have a really high mortgage, typically in a real estate boom, there's a whole lot of new construction going on. So if you've got this one little old house that you didn't rehab, you got a big mortgage on it, and you've got all this new construction that's going around, and then the bubble bursts, and these properties that are new construction now have to drop their rent. What do you think you're gonna have to do with your rent? You have to drop your rent significantly, but you've got this big mortgage against it, so you got a high mortgage and you got to drop your rents, or your place goes vacant because all these new construction places that went up around you, because that's what happens in a real estate boom. If I've got a choice between a new construction at $1,200 a month and your old house that you done painted over the wall panel, my property in South Philly, and I got this big mortgage against it, so I can't drop my rent. I can't compete. So if they're now charging $1,200 a month for new construction versus your small, average at best rehab house, and you got to pull down your rents aggressively, that's where you get into a position where a bunch of real estate investors are losing their properties, and I will be waiting for that opportunity.
Okay, so let's talk about, Ayesha's done all these amazing things. Let's talk about the worst deal that you've ever done.
My worst deals are always my primary residences. Always my primary residences. So in 2004, I bought a house when I moved to Virginia. I bought a condo, and again, the market was really high, but I'm like, I don't want to rent. Like, who rents? So I went down to Virginia, I bought a place where the market was fairly high, and it was really high down in Virginia. That was a disaster, because then I needed to sell it in 2007 when I moved back. Horrible investment. When I moved back to Pennsylvania in 2007, I bought a brand new construction condo in Cheltenham. Baby. Yeah, that was bad. That was really, it's always my personal residences.
Okay.
So now I rent where I live. I live in an apartment in the city.
Really?
Yeah, I figure I get my equity through a couple dozen properties and all that stuff. And I will eventually buy, but I'm thinking, all right, because now I'm looking at new construction and I'm like, damn it, Ayesha, you trying to do it again? So I'm thinking like, all right, what do I got to do this? If I want a primary residence. So I'm thinking I may buy like a shack somewhere that I got to put some money into. Like I might be in Kensington.
I think that's the type of discipline that you need.
Yeah, I might be in a rough
You need
part of
those
Kensington.
restrictions.
Yeah.
You need the restrictions.
Yeah.
So, talk about the worst investment deal that you did. I never did a bad investment deal.
Actually, the house I just sold in Overbrook. So I had a partner, and I generally don't do a lot of partnerships. I have one real estate partner. She and I primarily do all of our deals together. I had one partner where I was supposed to be just a capital investor, and I normally don't do that, but I did it. So I basically said, look, I'm going to buy the house. You will then, start rehabbing the house up to the extent of my purchase, and then we'll split everything 50-50. And he was going to do all the work. And because I bought the house up front, he was okay with doing the work on the back end. As it turns out, he couldn't get the funding because, who knows? Maybe he made it up in the first place, I don't know. So I said, all right, we're going to go back to closing, which we did. We converted the property over to just my LLC. In the meantime, the property had a fire. So one of the things I always caution, and I was even kind of willy-nilly on this before, and I tell every single investor, while you're rehabbing a property, you have to have insurance on it. You have to have a builder's risk policy. And prior to this happening, I was willing to take the risk. Like, well, the house looked like crap anyway. What's the worst thing that can happen? It can go bad real fast. So always get a builder's risk policy. He did not have a builder's risk policy. And I was so busy off, doing my own thing. I just started my franchise and was not focused on this house. So not only was there a fire with no builder's risk insurance policy, but then he didn't do anything to protect the house. So it went like, no tarp on it, there was no roof, like it was just rain, water, everything for like an entire winter. So I never even saw the house, and I do that, I'll do that all the time. I bought this house, I ain't been back there since. So he didn't do anything to protect the house. The house obviously had a lot of damage. So that ended up being a pretty bad investment because at that point I had to then figure out, all right, how am I gonna go into this investment just to get my money back out of it? I'm gonna have to put a ton of money into it, make it look real nice just to get I mean, that house ended up being a haunted house. I mean, Michelle can tell you that literally the day we were going to the final walkthrough, final walkthrough was at like 5. At 2 o'clock, it was a fire in the house again. I mean, it was like
What?
Yeah, it was. This was a whole situation. I'm like getting on the plane. Michelle's like, Ayesha, there's a fire truck here. Like, what's happening? It was bad. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you pull out of it from initially?
God is good. God is good. So I ended up getting, because of the next fire, I ended up getting like insurance money from that, because can y'all imagine if I didn't have insurance on it again? Like, that would have been like, look, you dummy. So I had insurance on it, builder's risk on it, of course, the second time, and I ended up making out in the deal. So I ended up breaking even on the deal because of the second fire.
Good.
God is good. And I did not burn my own property. Like, in case, well, I know some of y'all thinking, like, yeah. No, I did not burn my own property.
So, okay, outside of the insurance piece, what's your biggest lesson in that deal?
My biggest lesson is probably just hiring better contractors. I mean, I think contractors are probably the hardest part of this business.
Say that again.
So when people ask me, and people say this to me a lot, can I get your contractor's number? Like, there's something inside of me that makes me want to say, you son of a bitch. So I mean,
Like, I worked hard.
Like, listen, I'm going through 96 contractors yesterday, like, just to get this one, and you're like, well, I get his number? No, you can't get his number. I'm gonna break a glass over your head. So, and that's, in this business, that is the hardest part of real estate. So most of my lessons going through that property, like, if the person's the cheapest, even if the person's expensive, I mean, making sure that you get someone who can do quality work in your property is like all the difference.
So give us some tips for making sure, like a new investor who they're like, okay, I got my first deal, I need to find a contractor. What are the tips that you would give them for finding contractors?
One, you want to make sure you know they can pull permits. You want to see the insurance. Like, I want to see your stuff. You know what I mean? Like, don't just tell me, because the thing about Philly is, and I love the city, but we're a bunch of BSers. You know what I mean? Like, people like, oh no, I'm licensed, I'm insured. I got, and the other thing you've got to be leery of. Most of the contractors in the city, like most of the electricians and the plumbers, they pull permits under like one guy. It's like Joe. Like, everybody pulls permits under Joe. And quite frankly, I think Joe should be in jail too. But so you got all these people around the city who really don't know what they're doing, but Joe like lets everybody pull the permits, electric or plumbing, under this one. So that's where you can run into some issues. So you want to see. I want to see paperwork, and I want to know who you work for. Do not look at somebody's pictures of their work and say, this is what I've been. That person probably was like mopping the floors in that room. You know what I mean? Like, people will say, I'm gonna show you the work. You have no idea what that person was doing unless I physically like watched you do. I don't care. So you really have to be careful, especially in Philly, where people have grandiose ideas of what they can do, and really they can't.
Right. So I just want to take a quick aside. We had a situation like that in BTS where I can give you all the good stuff about BTS, but I'm gonna tell you the 100% honest to goodness truth. We had a contractor that came in, showed us pictures, and then someone from the group, and then multiple people had lined up because we believe in sticking together, and they did a really bad job on this person's. So first of all, the person is in this room. I'm super not going to shout that person out, but I want to thank you for being brave enough to be the guinea pig for that person. And long story short, that person has been ostracized from the group because you can't be doing no bad deals. But I just kind of want to piggyback off of that story about, like, he provided pictures. And, we're just happy and everything, whatever. He provided pictures, and it was just a no-go.
You have no idea what that person did in the property. I mean, he literally could have been the man that holds the ladder. You know what I mean? He's like showing you, this is what I can do.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And everyone I think knows it and realizes, in the city, you've really got to be careful. In fact, one investor I was talking to, he said he like held a contractor hostage in his basement until he finished the work. It's hard out here. It's hard out here. And when that man told me that, I understood exactly where he was emotionally. I understood. Yep.
You can't let him leave.
Nope. Do what you gotta do, bro.
So, okay, let's talk about I'm gonna ask you just one last question, and then we gotta kind of wrap it up because we're gonna get kicked out of here. But I could talk to you all day. I'm sure that everyone probably is like, oh, don't stop. But, okay, let's talk about the best deal you ever did and like where you really flex your investor muscles on the best deal you ever did.
So the best deal, if we're being honest, I bought Apple, a bunch of Apple in 2007. That is the best deal I ever did. That is the best deal. I mean, if you're just being honest, I mean, we're talking 1,000% returns. But the best house deal, those are my South Philly purchases. I bought the houses I bought in South Philly in 2011 that are all free and clear today. Those are my best deals. Yeah.
So if you could give any new investor or investor hopeful one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would say, if you haven't already, get your equity piggy bank. So, I know when we're looking for, and this is where I always, I do the exact same thing. When I'm looking for a primary residence, I'm looking for that glitzy, glammy, ooh, moving ready, HGTV, this is, if you can get your equity piggy bank as a primary residence, either it be you have to put your own sweat equity into it just to get the equity. The minute you can get that equity piggy bank, everything else will fall into place. And the other thing I would say is just make sure, because all of this is just very strategic stuff on how to buy real estate. But long before you get there, if you're a novice investor, because people say to me all the time, look, I got bad credit and I ain't got no money. How can I get into real estate? I'm like, don't. Because if you got bad credit and no money, then you probably have a series of bad behaviors.
Right.
That if we can just be honest. And people say all the time, I'll help you buy a house, no credit, bad credit, you got all this debt, 10 bankruptcies, and you got no money, I'll help you get into this game. And I'm like, no, you're gonna help me buy their house because they ain't gonna be able to pay the taxes, they ain't gonna be, So, for new investors,
Go ahead, do
the
that.
very first thing that you gotta do is make sure that you have what it takes to be, because it takes, you get a check from, and you have no idea how many real estate investors either call me or email me and say, I'm having problems, I'm about to lose my rental property, I'm going through foreclosure, and I'm like, well, what's the problem, sis? What happened? And I'm like, was the property unrented? She's like, yeah, it was rented. I'm like, wait, you had a tenant in there, you losing the property? Yeah, I'm losing the property. I'm like, well, what the hell were you doing with the rent? Oh, I had a situation, and what happened was, I'm like, that wasn't your money. It's not, I don't care what your situation was, you're a conduit in that case. If you have a mortgage and you have a tenant, your job is to get the rent to the mortgage company. So that, I think, is step one. For a novice investor, make sure that you've got the discipline. And I talk so much about discipline because I personally believe that how you do anything is how you do everything. With the exception of my love life, I'm a very disciplined individual. I think there's one area we all choose to fail. And as long as there's one area, as long as that one area is not money, then you'll be fine in real estate investing.
I love you, I do. It's true though, that's very true. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna take one quick question. Make it a good one. Decide amongst yourselves. Be mad if somebody chooses a dumb one. Be mad at them because there's only one question. Yes, Janisa.
I stalked you.
Here, come on, can you get the mic?
Oh, God. I'm so fat and pregnant.
It's okay.
I stalked you, and you met me at Starbucks.
I remember.
Then I started stalking you again. So now,
I love
you
this
have,
song.
you have this equity piggy bank, no mortgages.
Ask that
No.
question again.
So I have homes. 9. I'm losing count. I'm trying to get you. Stop posting. But I have homes, no mortgages.
Yep.
I'm scared to take one loan out. Nikki said to stop using my money, right?
Yep.
You said stop using your money. Where do I start?
If I had 9 free and clear properties, when you say stop using your money, and I don't want to get you kidnapped in here today, but
No, my license to carry is my license to bury. They're not taking me.
Park that 380, sis. So you have 9 free and clear properties. Amen. You have cash that you could use to buy your property as well.
Yeah, I'm running out though. I called Nikki. I'm running out.
So, okay, and that last point you just said, I'm running out of cash, is important. So for me, I do cash deals because I have a franchise that's it just backs a truck up of cash. I'm wondering, and the reason I invest so much is because at some point someone's gonna realize I'm no rocket scientist and they shouldn't pay me as much money as they do in this franchise. So because I have a steady stream of cash coming in, that's why I do all cash deals. If I had a dwindling cash supply, I would use that equity piggy bank.
So 1, Two.
It depends on how much you're trying to buy.
All right.
I just don't want you walking around broke.
Yeah.
That's the thing, right? Right. So do what you have to. I mean, you do have the opportunity. I mean, you own 9 properties. You have no debt, right?
Good credit too.
Right. And you have good credit. So that's why I gave you that advice. And nobody's saying go out and get mortgages on all of them so you can ball, right? But you don't have to use your own. And on top of that, it doesn't even have to be a debt type of situation. It can be a situation where you maybe do some type of creative financing partnership or whatever, something with someone because you already have the expertise, right? So you can leverage your expertise. So there's a couple of different things you should do, but what I don't want you to do, any of you, I mean, there's this extreme, right? Like you can either be Ayesha, but I don't want you to be having all these properties but no cash to walk around with, right? Like that's really important too, right? Because what's the point, right? Okay. So, thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.